I Hate the News is the weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's May 26th, 2026. Immigration court data from the Washington, D.C. metropolitan region shows unexplained differences between the number and disposition of cases in Maryland and Virginia. We have the data. The Montgomery County Council passed its 2027 operating budget last Thursday, and MCPS announced possible cuts to positions at last Friday's Board of Education meeting. We have the details. And even as the school district faces a budget shortfall and expects dramatic cuts, it has opened a new front: End Open Lunch, which is the practice of allowing students to leave the school campus for lunch. You might imagine there are pros and cons on the issue. On the one side, security and lateness problems, and on the other, student freedom and mental health. But the discussion in the board meeting has been inexplicably procedural. And more. Stay with us.
What's the matter? You seem so surprised. Glancing in the morning paper tonight. Seems that the French can capitalize. No, the execution of the spy. During General dead and died. Watch his family cry. Watch his family cry.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Silver Spring rock musician J.D. Brayton, who goes by the stage name Mr. Tree Frog. The two songs we play in this episode are Halo and Troubled Sleep. You can find his music on Bandcamp.
The Czechs are barking for the nuclear call. Nairobi got hungry, so they started a war. Famous senators face the law. Babylon discovered she was a hoe with a halo.
A Tennessee court dismissed charges of human trafficking against Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man at the center of the Trump administration's immigration fight. The court said that the federal government was acting vindictively after the Supreme Court forced the Trump administration to bring back Abrego Garcia from El Salvador, where he was deported despite the court ordering against it. We have an update on data from immigration courts in the Washington, D.C. region. Jerry Kickinson is a Montgomery County resident who writes a periodic Substack on data coming out of the federal government's immigration enforcement actions.
ICE has not released an update since I was last on your show, so their data still only goes into early March. They're releasing this data as a result of FOIA requests, and they're being forced to basically release this data. We get the data when we get it or when a judge finally forces them to do it. I looked at the immigration court data, which is released by the Department of Justice, which runs the immigration courts, and they release their data every month, like clockwork. So this data is current into May, into this month. And I looked at what's happening to the residents of Maryland and the district and Virginia. The main highlight is how many people are being ordered removed, which is the legal term for being deported, versus getting relief. And relief can be something like being granted asylum, right? Or just a right to stay in the country. There was a huge spike in removal orders. So at the beginning of the administration into the summer, there was a slight dip in July and then another small dip in October, but it's been rising again, and a steady decrease in the number of relief granted from an already low number. I did take a look just to see at the last year of the Biden administration, although the absolute numbers are very much different. So really about twice as many of our residents are being ordered deported now than in the last year of the Biden administration, 2024. The trend, however, was the same. The number of removal orders was also increasing in Biden's last year. So I wanted to make that point because this isn't just Trump or Republicans. This trend started back then.
Judges have to order removal or relief. Are the judges working to a different standard?
They are judges, but they are administrative judges. They are not part of the judiciary branch. They work for the Department of Justice. They are subject to what the Attorney General, or now acting Attorney General of the United States, tells them. They are not at all independent like we think a judge should be. In the past year, this administration has fired a lot of these judges, probably a couple hundred of these judges. And they are firing the judges most likely to grant relief because that's a political decision. And they're hiring judges, often temporarily, who will not grant relief so often.
Okay, so what are the absolute numbers? How do they compare across the three jurisdictions, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, that you've been looking at?
In Maryland, the number of removals ordered basically peaked at close to 1,600 a month over the summer of last year. It then dipped down to as low as about 1,000 a month towards the end of the year. There was a government shutdown, you may have heard, that may have affected this. But then it's been rising again, and now it's back up over 1,200 a month. For Maryland, the relief numbers basically were at around 200 a month or so, and they're now down to about half that, maybe 100 a month.
And in Virginia and DC?
DC does not have an immigration court, so they will go to the courts in Virginia. Well, mainly in Annandale and Sterling. There, the numbers are quite a bit higher. They peaked at almost 2,300. It had the same dip towards the fall, down to about 1,600 a month, and now it's back up to 2,200 a month.
Do the Virginia immigration courts serve a larger population than Maryland immigration courts?
They do look at almost twice as many cases, yeah.
Maryland is 6 million people. Virginia is a larger state, and add DC. So it could just be a function of the population that they serve.
Oh, you're saying as opposed to the intensity of enforcement?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, indeed, yes, that could explain some of it.
Do you think this data shows that enforcement and immigration court activity is somewhat lower in Maryland
than in DC or Virginia?
Yeah.
Yes, I think one could say that. Yes, relatively. That doesn't necessarily make you feel better if you say you live in a high intensity area of Maryland. If one lives in Prince George's County in Langley Park, for instance, you're easily as intense as what's happening in Northern Virginia. But if you're looking at Maryland State as a whole, sure. I mean, most of our counties have very little activity going on, relatively. I did look at two other items which actually showed me an interesting difference between Maryland and then the Virginia jurisdiction. I was looking at when there is a bond hearing for Maryland residents, the vast majority of cases, the bond is granted. People are being released. And so basically the judge is finding that this person is not a risk to the community. They're not a flight risk. But the number of bond hearings is very, very low in the voluntary departures. There are a lot more voluntary departures going on in the Virginia courts than in Maryland. And I was wondering, well, why would that be? So I then took a look at another data point, which is what's called the custody status in the immigration court. And what I found is almost 10 times as many respondents in Virginia courts were detained throughout the entire duration of their case, as opposed to Maryland. Very few Maryland residents have been detained for the entirety of their case. And as you may know, these cases can take months or even longer, right, to go on. And so it is possible, this is just speculation, that in Virginia, since so many more of the respondents have been sitting in ICE detention, which in bad conditions for month after month, are just basically saying, enough is enough. Just end my case. I'll leave. Just get me out of here. Whereas in Maryland, since there are fewer under those conditions, they are right. Not so much being that I'm desperate and I will just voluntarily leave.
Which begs the question, why? Why are Maryland detainees living in different, better conditions than Virginia, DC detainees? Why would that happen?
That's a good question about why are they being detained for less time, right, than Virginia, DC residents. I do not have data to help me, but that's a very good question. Could we try to figure out, is that just chance? Was it some policy decision. I don't know. That I don't know.
This difference between Maryland and Virginia is really, really interesting. As you find more, please come back because I am now very curious about why this should happen.
Right. I mean, one could argue that, well, are the Virginia residents more likely to have some criminal record and therefore be detained?
But why?
I have absolutely no evidence of that. And that doesn't really make sense either. Why would that be? Right. I mean, yeah. So,
Jerry Higginson, thank you.
Thank you again, Sunil. Appreciate it.
Governor Westmore chose not to sign the two high-profile immigration bills passed by the General Assembly in the 2026 session, the Community Trust Act and the Data Privacy Act, but he will not veto them either, so those bills become law without his signature. He said he supports the objectives of the bills, but worries about their implementation. Montgomery County Council passed its 2027 budget last Thursday that left MCPS short of its budget ask. And on Friday, at the Board of Education meeting, MCPS presented the consequences. We start with Superintendent Thomas Taylor.
It brings us no pleasure whatsoever to bring forward really drastic reductions to our ability to serve our community better. And the question has been asked, and I've got an awful answer, and Ms. Montoya, you asked it again, which is like, who on earth is going to do this work? And the reality is that a lot of this work isn't going to get done, and there is going to be a service interruption, and our families are going to have less as a result. Quite candidly, and this is nothing new for our dedicated school staff, is that every year we are asked to do more with just a little less. And in particular, over the past 15 years, and I think that this kind of goes back to the fiscal 2010 housing market bubble burst, which we've never recovered from, that every year has been this year, a year where we have been asked to do more with a little less. Even though people say, but you keep getting increases in your budget. Increases that fall short of the mandates and requirements that we are expected to comply with. So with that, I am disappointedly preparing and sharing with you a presentation on where we stand fiscally. I'm going to turn things over to our Chief Financial Officer, Yvonne Alfonso Windsor, and our Chief of Staff, Essie McGuire, and our Deputy Chief of Facilities, Andrea Swayatoka.
MCPS Chief of Staff, Essie McGuire.
The County Council did appropriate an increase of $128.7 million more than last year's budget, the current year. That is a total of $61 million less than the board's request. Because the council provided MCPS with a one-time contribution to our employee benefit plan from the OPEB fund, and the OPEB fund stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. It's a fund that all the county agencies and other agencies, public government agencies, have been required to maintain against future liability for retiree health care. So from that fund, the county is allowing us to use and providing us $25 million for our employee benefit fund. The $25 million that the council is providing from OPEB means that we can use that $25 million for other expenditures. And so that is the one-time nature of the revenue shift that the council is providing to us. So the appropriation, if you just do the math of the actual money that we're getting from the council, that's why it's $61 million less. But the impact on expenditures is only $36 million. So again, that's the number that we need to tie to in terms of identifying money that we can't spend out of our operating budget.
MCPS CFO, Yvonne Alfonso Windsor.
The total budgeted positions in central services is 693. Out of those 693, 28 are being reduced through this alliteration of the budget. That is a 4% of reductions in central services. Additionally, contractual services for $975,000 and higher ed partnerships for $500,000, the support services area. The reduction here in terms of dollars is $14.5 million. The total FTEs for these positions is a little bit over 2,600. The recommended reduction is 113 positions, which is a 4.3% reduction. There are currently, of those 113 positions, there are currently 33 vacant and 80 filled. This includes, and again, it's not a comprehensive list, but includes social workers that are based supporting some of the social workers at the schools, the PPWs, which is moving, the recommendation is to move the PPWs to a model of 2 per cross-functional teams and 1 specifically for alternative programs. The family engagement specialists, we're moving to a model of 1 per cross-functional teams. And I just want to make sure everybody remembers there's 12 cross-functional teams in total. The EML therapeutic counselors, we're moving to a model of 1 per region, so 6 positions will be maintained. In terms of school-based positions, obviously that's the core of our work, and that's where the bulk of our budget and positions is. This accounts for $30.5 or $30.6 million in reductions. Currently, we have over 22,000 positions that are school-based. These are positions, not necessarily employees. The reduction recommended is 294.7 FTEs. That accounts for 1.3% of the school-based staffing. Of those 294 FTEs, there are currently 125 vacant and 168 filled. Additionally, the College and Career Navigators, it reduces the College and Career Navigators, the high school staff development teachers, and the English composition assistants. The media assistants are going to a different model where each elementary and middle school will have a 0.5 media assistant, and the high schools, because their enrollment level, they would have a 1.0 FTE per high school. The social workers, this reduces all social workers that are directly tied to special education. And it also pauses the increase to the equity add-on funding for schools. MCPS would like to offer incentive for employees who are currently eligible to retire. The incentive will mean that 10-month employees that are eligible to retire July 1 will receive a one-time payment of $10,000, and 12-month employees an incentive retirement of $12,000. Again, this will be one-time payment. The deadline for submission, we have been delayed to Friday, June 5th.
Superintendent Taylor with a summary of the capital budget shortfall.
A third of the capital improvement plan request was unfunded. More than half of the projects were delayed. Technology was cut in half, and there are facility planning dollars that have been zeroed out.
Keep in mind, these are excerpts taken from a 4-hour-long meeting of the Board of Education. If you want the full version, MCPS has a YouTube channel called MCPS TV. The Board of Education will make a final vote on the budget changes June 4th. Lobby season is still open. Meanwhile, council member and county executive candidate Evan Glass wrote an op-ed proposing that the composition of the Board of Education be changed to include an appointed representative of the county executive. All members of the Board of Education are currently elected by the general public, and in case of the student member, by MCPS secondary students. Even while MCPS is fighting this budget battle, the school district has decided to open a new front, ending open lunch, which is the practice of allowing students to leave the school campus during lunchtime. 11 out of 25 MCPS schools currently have this privilege. This only affects schools in urban locations where going off campus for lunch is a possibility. Where high schools are not located near commercial centers, this is a moot point. Nora Gordon is a parent at Bethesda Chevy Chase High School, a Georgetown University public policy professor, and writes an MCPS-focused Substack called Why Is It Like This?
On May 13th, the Policy Management Committee held a meeting. It had one agenda item, and it was the open lunch policy. I saw that. I watched the meeting. I didn't really know what was going on. But at that meeting, the MCPS staff framed up two questions for the Policy Management Committee. And the committee chair, Brenda Wolf, said, this is something that needs to be handled sooner rather than later. There was no explanation of why it needed to be handled sooner rather than later. The way MCPS framed it was that there were two questions for the committee to consider. One was, did the committee want to think about what the open lunch policy should be and get into a conversation about the trade-offs involved in open lunch? And another question was, did the committee think that open lunch was within the board's purview, or as an operational issue, and they kept using that phrase, operational, did the committee think that this was something that the board should not be involved with, and therefore they should rescind the policy and it would be completely within the control of MCPS and the superintendent? The open lunch policy itself is basically a sentence long, and it says, it was written in 1978, revised in 95, and it says high schools and MCPS can't have open lunch unless they already have it or they go through the policy to get it as outlined in the MCPS regulation. So it basically grandfathers schools who have open lunch to having it and says that MCPS will have a regulation that explains how you can get it.
Have you seen those regulations?
Yeah, the regulation basically sets out a process where the student government puts together a written request for the principal at the school. The principal then assembles an advisory committee who makes a recommendation and the principal decides. So it's school by school.
Is there any security reason given for this change? Is that the sort of underlying motivation?
I wonder about that, given the timing with the various security incidents at MCPS high schools recently. But from that meeting, you can't tell what the reason is.
I want to distinguish between the process arguments and the substantive arguments. To the best of your understanding, what are the substantive arguments? I understand the process argument now.
What was weird is that MCPS wasn't making substantive arguments. They were saying the superintendent is interested in this and kind of he doesn't want to step on your toes. And so maybe he's going to open up the regulations, but we want to let you go first. Then when they discussed those considerations, it was really like the way you might just discuss these considerations with a friend if you were going in cold, kind of thinking out loud, no data. Like, oh, I wonder how it matters for attendance. Maybe students go to open lunch and they don't come back.
Do we know whether attendance in open lunch schools was worse than attendance in no open lunch schools, particularly after lunch?
So someone asked that on May 13th, and there was a supervisor from MCPS, and she didn't have data with her, but her answer was attendance or lateness after lunch to the period after lunch. There's more lateness than to other periods of the day in schools with and without open lunch. That was her answer.
If the board rescinds this policy, does it take out the student government application process from consideration now?
May 21st, the policy committee moved that the board vote to rescind the policy, and that did not pass. There was then a motion to revise the policy, which also did not pass. And so at this point, nothing is happening on this policy, although the policy management committee could decide again to take it up. But if the board were to rescind the policy, what that would mean is the superintendent would go through the process of modifying the regulations around open lunch as he wishes.
Do you recall what the votes were? Who voted for, who voted against?
The first vote was what Brenda Wolf had moved to rescind the policy. She voted in favor of that, as did Grace Rivera Oven, Carla Silvestre, and Natalie Zimmerman. The student member was absent. Laura Stewart, Julie Yang, and Rita Montoya voted against rescission. Then Rita Montoya introduced a motion to refer it back to the committee for revision. That motion also did not pass. They needed 5 votes, and they only had 4.
Apart from Bethesda Chevy Chase, where you are a parent, were there other schools, students or community members that had open lunch, that have open lunch out in protest? Or is it mainly Bethesda Chevy Chase at this point?
So the MCCPTA area vice president for our area, which I believe is BCC, Whitman, Walter Johnson, maybe a 4th school, is Kathy Stocker, and she was there testifying in her MCCPTA capacity on behalf of all of those communities.
Do you know the schools that have open lunch and schools that don't?
That was a question asked on May 13th, and they said that 11 schools had it. They did not give a list of the 11 schools, and they noted that the schools implement it in different ways.
Can you distinguish between open lunch and being able to move to different parts of campus, being on campus, but not off campus? I mean, is that a difference? Is that a difference that exists?
I don't know. What I do know is that campuses without open lunch sometimes have problems enforcing it. And so actually there was a moment in the May 13th committee meeting where they were talking about pedestrian safety, and Brenda Wolf talked about how, it's really hard to drive by Blair at lunchtime because everyone's out in the street. And then Julie Yang pointed out that Blair had a closed lunch.
Nora Gordon, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for this episode. Be sure to check out our feature interview series that comes out Friday mornings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from Silver Spring rock musician J.D. Brayton, who goes by the stage name Mr. Tree Frog. The 2 songs we play in this episode are Halo and Troubled Sleep. You can find his music on Bandcamp. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
What I thought I heard, yeah, I heard. You will never learn.